Welcome everybody, Marion Cole here, Media Relations Manager of the Greenville Triumph. I am doing something very special today. We are filming our first segment, Coffee with Coach. I am joined by head coach of the Greenville Triumph and sporting director, John Harkes. We are also joined by owner of Bridge City Coffee here in Greenville, Greg. Greg, the floor is yours. This is a partnership that really has blossomed out of your relationship with John. So talk about that. Talk about how coffee and soccer are two of the most globally shared experiences and how that has really kind of blossomed in this partnership.
Sure, yeah. So it's been a really cool thing. John, I mean, you started coming in here soon after you moved here, I think.
Yeah.
So
I hit this right away.
Yeah.
He couldn't get rid of me.
No, yeah. Once he came in, he never left. So that was,
sorry, that used to be my chair.
Yep. So it was a really cool thing, and he's been a regular, and so I love soccer personally. So it was great to connect with him and then learn about what the Triumph was doing and how you all were wanting to build community here in addition to the program. And so it's been great. It's been a great ride so far. For me as a fan, and then partying together with you all and becoming friends with this guy.
Yeah.
It's a little added bonus there.
I do have to ask though, in this day of social media, digital media, no one can get anywhere without maps. Did you just pull up coffee shops near me, or did you really just stumble upon this place?
It was quite simple because it was on my way
right
to our training ground, and so as I was going past this, I was like, wow, what's that unique little kind of coffee shop over there? And so I popped in, and I was like, and everybody can go to the bigger chains and stuff like that. And I always like to kind of find out in Greenville, and Greg, you and I talked about this a lot, about the local, kind of support your local, ownership groups, the smaller group, kind of shops and everything. And when I popped in here, I was just like, wow, what a cool, friendly, warm place. And then as I looked around and I saw all the different symbols and what Bridge City Coffee stood for, that connection to the community, the leadership values that are there, setting the tone and giving opportunities and a platform for young students and even the people that work here now, Greg. I mean, guys, they might not have that opportunity to understand the responsibility of being behind a counter. What's it like to be a barista, and they feel good about themselves. And he makes that happen here, and I want to make that happen on the soccer field with our players. And so I think the more we sat down and talked, and he and I were hitting it off on just like, leadership. What do you do as a coach? What do you do as ownership? What do you do here? And there was so many different similar values, core values that we stood for. So I think the more coffee I had, the more I was in here. Greg was just like, he's back again.
Yeah. No, that's a
gotta get this guy out of here.
Yeah.
Who is he?
It's like, Greg, hey, Greg. He's like, oh my gosh.
That was a great. Can you go around? I'm gonna need to package that. That was a great.
I know.
That was great.
But that's kind of like what we discussed anyway, you and I, from the first day, to be honest with you.
Yeah, leadership was one of the biggest commonalities, like you said, with shared values in that and what really makes a good leader, how do you draw out the best in his players and my employees. That was one of the things we bonded over. So one of the questions I have for you is, you guys won the championship. Congrats. That is an awesome thing. That's right. Champions. And I mean, last year was just hard for everybody and going through all the different challenges that COVID presented, which was a lot of challenges. So how did you navigate through that to win the championship?
That was hard.
Yeah.
There was a challenge. I mean, like you love the game of soccer. I think when you're a coach, you're not just a coach. You have to be there. You have to be, genuine, like an authentic kind of leader for them every day. And I think being open in communication to connect with them on a daily basis was the most important thing, because the biggest thing through isolation was mental health. And how there's pressure on athletes, which people forget. They get to do their dream job, they're playing soccer, but there is pressure on them. And they put pressure on themselves. And so there's a lot of different athletes that at certain times sometimes can become depressed, or they go down a rabbit hole and things become negative. you have to be there to lift them up, and it's not false. It's not like happy everybody. It's not that. It's just being genuine and connecting with them and making sure that, hey, you doing all right? I'm checking on you every day. So where it was texting or emailing beforehand is now FaceTime. It's Zoom. It's making sure you're present with them. You can see them every day. And I think that was the number one thing. I just, for whatever reason, I said that's got to be the thing that helped drives us to keep us going on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. And then the season, it was cut short. You know, we didn't know if we were going to have a season. We had 2 preseasons over about 12 to 14 weeks. So that's a lot, and it's taxing on the player. So finding the balance between that physical application, the mentality of the group, and just being one, making the core value of like, this is team, this is family. And if you trust in this is a safe place for you. And that's what we push, Greg, all the way through.
That's beautiful, because, you know, I think it highlights the overlap between soccer, because it's, what COVID destroyed was like community relationships, because we were all isolated, like you said. And,
that's
and
right.
so with soccer being a team sport, if you're all isolated except for practice, and then a player goes back and he's frustrated that he didn't do well, it's cool how you're saying you had to enhance that community to keep that alive and keep them positive.
And to that note, I feel like what you're talking about is really rhythms. You know, you mentioned the 2 preseasons. You mentioned this long-winded idea of we're going to play, we're not going to play. How do we approach training? Well, how do we do this? And so your rhythm is just messed up. And Greg, I'm kind of curious to know, from a small business owner's perspective, did you feel that with your shop, with your employees? You know, this idea of mental health being a huge factor, but also just, you know, not having a rhythm is hard.
Yeah, for sure, it is. And when there's all these unknowns, like for you guys, don't know if the season's going to happen, don't know, and that affects your players and you all as a business, like that affects everyone. And so with our business here, the lack of rhythm and the huge unknown, it was, that was hard to navigate through. And one of the coolest things that came out of that was my employees started a podcast, because they missed the face-to-face interaction with employees. So we had the drive-through open, but they're like, we miss connecting with our customers. And so I think I may have said that wrong. The employees want to connect with the customers, but they miss them so much that they're like, hey, we just want to be silly and authentic with them. And so they kind of started a rhythm to your question, like through regularly recording these things and then connecting with them still. So it was very challenging for sure. But I think the common thing that you spoke of and you asked in your questions is just the value that community brings and togetherness, whether it's however many guys you have on the team, 18, I don't know total what you have.
We are now up to 23.
23.
Yeah, how about that?
Nice.
How about that?
Nice. 3 goalkeepers?
Did not start out that way.
Yeah, 3 goalkeepers. He knows right away. You know the roster. We talk about it on a weekly basis. We actually might be picking the lineup this weekend.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I tell you what, though, it did not start that way.
Yeah,
the
I know.
lineup was, coming into the first preseason, we were like, do we have enough people to fill
That's true.
a scrimmage?
Yeah.
So it's been interesting.
I had a few baristas out there, neutral players.
Yep.
Thanks, Greg. He's like, as long as they're back for 8 o'clock, and they got to run the drive.
The standing out there. So one of the other cool things, I think, in your life experience, you played on a global stage in soccer, and many, like the biggest stage in the World Cup, and then playing internationally. And then I assume you drank coffee when you lived abroad and when you were over there. So like coffee and
Funny
soccer.
question, brother.
Oh wait, was that a no?
No, it's a great question, because I grew up in a Scottish family and drinking tea all the time. Tea.
Right.
But when I went with my wife to Positano down the Amalfi Coast, I was looking to make tea in the morning in our villa. And Gianfranco Buccelli, who's a friend of mine, my neighbor, he was like, what are you doing, Harkes? And I said, looking for tea, to boil water or whatever. He goes, there's no such thing here in Italy. Italian roast coffee, fresh. And he goes, it's coming at 6:30. So I woke up early, the roast coffee came, and that's when it hit me. I went, what? It was like Will Ferrell. I was like, what is this haunting aroma? What? And I was like drinking, like, oh, wow. And then my wife Cindy started liking it, and then so it was like, coffee to me kind of came later, and then my kids, as they were younger, they would go, oh, does that mean you're old, Dad? Grandma and Granddad and Papa drink it, and I'm like, no, that doesn't mean I'm old. What? But to your point, the globally and everything else about the game, coffee's like that in a way, because what you do is when you have a cup of coffee, what do you say to somebody in the morning? Hey, you want to go grab a coffee? Do you want to get together? The inclusivity of it, I think it's like inviting, and that's why I love this place. I love this spot. Marion was saying when she walked up, you built the outside, you know, for everybody to be outside and be safe through COVID, which was fantastic. But now it's just a great meeting spot.
Great to be out there.
So I think from that perspective, it's just like the ball. You just throw a soccer ball down in the middle of a park somewhere, and kids gravitate to it. It's similar to coffee. They just put a cup of coffee down. Here's a pot. It's just a welcoming kind of warm approach. And you know, when you grow up through the generations, your mom and dad were always like, oh, that's, you know, the old school way. It was like, that's for the company, don't touch that. You know, like I'm making special coffee for them. I'm like, oh, what do we get? You know, but it's funny where there's a synergy there. And I love how it kind of comes together where, I mean, Aaron Walker and Tyler Pollock sit here with me. We do meetings here. You know that. You're like, get out. You know?
No. I love
We're like, our meeting's going too long. And you're like, how many more coffees are they doing? But it is that kind of, that welcoming, open feeling. And I love that about coffee. I really do.
You know, what I think is so interesting about that is that you don't have to know a lot about either one of them. When you gave that analogy about you throw a ball out into the field and kids will just start to gravitate to it. They don't know how to play soccer properly. A lot of people have to start drinking coffee, you know, and it can be one of those experiences where you're like, I don't really know much. You go up to the barista, they, you know, tell you what they think you would like, and it's still, although you don't have that much knowledge, you still can experience it. And that's something that I feel like we strive so much to do at our home games. Having you at our games is, you know, an incredible help to that. But I don't know if that's how y'all feel, but that's definitely, I remember my first coffee. The approachability is definitely something that I think is worldwide for both sports.
I do love that because I went to South Africa when I was much younger, and I just remember we went to a township and there's like probably 35 people, so massive teams. But you know, to your point, dropped a ball, everybody just playing, and it was makeshift goals, but we were all loving it. And the variety, you know, of that, you can just do that, or you go up to the professional World Cup level. Similarly, you can just drink any old cup of coffee, or you can have a geisha natural blue process thing that costs a lot of money.
It crosses this, you know, barrier of class, of economics, of, you know, race, of ethnicity, of everything. Both, I feel like soccer and coffee both cross that barrier just immensely easy compared to a lot of things.
It was a super cool thing, super cool over that. So John, we mentioned earlier that we share a passion for leadership, and I think there's a lot of overlap in how we both approach that, valuing the individual as a human being rather than commoditizing them. We've talked a lot about that. And so one of our biggest criteria here, our mission is building value and hope in people through coffee. And one of the biggest criteria is, I tell this to people that are interviewing, people that just ask about the shop, we care most about the human being and if they care about others. So if I have somebody come in here who is a world championship barista and they're a jerk, like, you know, that's not going to work. I'm sorry. They're the most skilled professional that I could hire, but they don't care about our employees. It's not going to work. And conversely, if a gem of a human being comes in here and they know nothing about coffee, I'll say, okay, well, can you learn? Are you teachable? And then we'll train them in coffee, and they care about people.
Right.
So similarly, I've talked with you, and you've said, you know, man, there's this guy over here. He's really skilled, but I don't know how he's going to fit our culture and dynamic if he's a great team player. Right. So what does that look like for you guys with the valuing the human or the person?
It's absolutely spot on. Character is number one. And, you know, you can look at the ability of anybody, a skill set that they have. Like you termed it, if that person is a very selfish individual or doesn't get along or doesn't understand the big picture of like what it means to the value of being in a team environment, then that's going to be a problem for me. And so everybody that, you know, you go through a process of, you know, scouting a player, getting to know them, speaking about their families, where they come from, where they value, that's a big part of it. And so it's not just like, hey, this is a talented kid, he wants to come play for Greenville. I'm like, okay, that's great, but let me talk to him, let me get an idea of like what he understands he's coming into and what our culture is. And if he fits into that and has value for that and respects that, that's number one. And that goes a long way. And to a point that you just said, there's a lot of kids that you may get as baristas that are like underprivileged, underserved areas, kids coming out that had it tough in their lives and single parent and whatever it may be, they come from nothing.
Yeah.
And you want to give them some hope. You want to give them something to cling on to and go, wow, you mean you believe in me? Oh, wow, that's great. Because that's the best leaders. It's not making your team believe in you. It's making them believe in themselves.
Yep, exactly.
When you get that, and you and I have had a number of conversations about that, and it's not, you can't switch off that leadership. It has to be every day.
Yep.
It's everyday constant. So they know what's coming in. And so building the culture is really important. I mean, when we started this club in 2018, in the September, building into our first year of 2019, that was number one, character. Joe Irwin, Chris Lewis, we all talked about character. And I said, that's the only players I go for. Of course, now, the bonus is when you get that skill set, when you get this specific thing.
Yeah.
But building that all the way back in those days, the harder part now as we go into year 3 is protecting that culture.
Yeah.
Protecting the culture. Because you can screw it up. Like people go, oh, you throw a bad apple into whatever, that whole cliche saying. But in some parts it's true, but the rest of the team knows, like, they're going to call out that player.
Yep.
You know, if they're not being
If the culture's
professional.
strong enough.
Yes.
Yep.
And right now, it's a strong culture. It is a good culture.
That's
and
great.
so, and I think based on your question is like the value in the person is number one. That is a priority. And that's authentic leadership because you really believe in who they are. You want to get across to them. You care about them. And they usually rise up 10, 20% more of productivity. Like their performance levels go up. And the mental health part of it is huge. You believe in them, then they go, wow, I got confidence. There's no athlete in the world that can play without confidence.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what sport it is. But it's the same as being a barista. Working here under pressure, serving people, being courteous. Every one of the people that I've come through with you and worked with have always been polite and genuinely interested in helping you. Like Marion said, what do you want? And I'm like, oh, well, what's that one there? What's a snickerdoodle? What's a morning mist?
All 18 questions.
Yeah, so it's almost like, and going back to again, it's like adaptability. Everybody has to adapt to every situation.
I think one of the things you said that really stood out, or two really, was the helping them understand their own value.
Yeah.
That is one of our biggest things here. I had all these assessments for our employees. We partner with nonprofits around town and hire from their participants when they phase out, and they still have to interview and get the job. But one of our core principles is just helping people discover the best of who they are. So that's, but then the aspect of them having to believe in themselves to execute a skill the best. One of our baristas was great. So we'd train her, she would do it, and then she would start messing up again, and then we'd train her again. And so it got to the point where one of my managers was like, I've seen her do this 1,000 times. Why is she not doing it? And so we're talking through it with him, like peel back the layers. Was she confident today? Do you think she has that self-confidence? And so then he started not doing the skill training, but the self-worth.
Yeah.
Instilling that more in her. And then it was just like a switch flipped when they connected on that, and she had the skill, but she wasn't connecting the dots with the value and all that. So it's
you got kids that are coming out of high school that are graduating, and you've got kids that are older that need help and they need guidance and need some direction, and you bring that to them through coffee, which is fantastic.
And I think what's so much, so much of that just comes on the effort. Just taking the effort to peel back those layers. And there's probably several companies out there that don't take that effort and don't look at their employees from a person first. But what you just mentioned about, I feel like what a lot of our fan base doesn't realize is that a lot of our players, they're barely over 20. Yes, we have some veteran guys. And I'm working with the nonprofits you do. I'm sure that you see very, very young employees as well. And so to realize that from both of you, and to really not hone in on the youth, but for lack of a better phrase, realize that they still have so much to learn. They still have so much potential, so much growth. Sometimes all it takes is just a little belief from someone else to cross over into yourself, which to me, speaking of crossover, that is what has been so impressive about y'all's friendship, is that it has crossed over entirely to the soccer team. I mean, this is their home away from home.
Yeah. It
love
is,
that.
yeah, for sure. And
Yeah, we love that.
Everybody's like, well, we're getting, even if we're traveling, like they'll be like, is there enough time in between training? Can we grab a bite to eat
Yeah.
and go grab a Bridge City?
Go get some coffee.
Yeah.
And then so they love it. They love coming up here, and the relationship and the partnership has been fantastic, Greg. And what you give to our team and you do give us, like Marion just said, another home for us to come to and be friendly. And feel good about ourselves. It's great. You guys love it.
We love it. We love it as well. It's cool, like seeing Dallas before he left to go play internationally, and he just stopped in here. We talked, and it was like, man, that is super cool.
And by the way, like you said, he is one that's being educated in coffee. He tried to make coffee with our blend.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, wait, how much did you put in there? Like, what's going on? You're supposed to put a filter in first. He's like,
gosh.
right.
Oh,
So
no.
it's been interesting to see that process, And
So basically, you need to come out to Bob Jones, and then we need to actually have like a coffee
On the
making
training
class.
facility.
Yes, like this is how you make a proper cup of
So
coffee.
what's funny is I gave him one of our instant like brew. It's
that little packet.
yeah, the bean
that's
bags.
cool.
I
So
love
I gave
that.
him a fail-safe method. All he
Yeah,
had to do was like pour.
More than hot water, kid.
Yeah.
Hot water.
If
That's
you
what
mess
you need.
this up, you really just don't even deserve to drink coffee.
Sorry, Dallas.
So
Sorry.
2 parts hydrogen, part oxygen. That makes water. Boil it.
Yeah, get it nice and hot.
No, it's good, man.
Well, now that we have touched base a lot on y'all's relationship, this partnership, I mean, at the end of the day, you love talking shop about soccer with him. You love
Big
coming
time.
in here and talking about it with him. You get the game. You obviously get the game at a level that most don't ever get the chance to understand it at. So, switching gears a little bit, John, you and I talk soccer all the time, and one thing that we have talked about, I feel like immensely already this season, is how the preseason has prepared your team for the successful early start that they had.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that and how you were really strategic about this preseason and really using it as a stepping stone for early success.
Yeah, I think early on, you and I were talking, Caitlin as well, over at Legacy. It was a training session. It was like, what does that preseason look like? What's the, the opposition, John? What are you lining up? And I think from my perspective was, I don't want it to be another like, hey, defending the title and everybody sit back. And I think you invite pressure on yourself there. There's a target there. But also you think, oh, we'll do the same thing we did last year. Well, you can't. You can't replicate that. You have to improve. We always have to evolve. In order to do that, we've got to be tested. We've got to get beaten up. And we had to play against my former club, DC United, at Major League Soccer, just to see what that level was like and what we can learn about ourselves. And then we played against Charleston Battery again, which we do every year. We've got Charlotte as well with Mike Jeffries. I've known him through soccer for a long period of time. Mike down at Charleston as well. And then, we got to play Louisville with John Hackworth. And it really tests ourselves and see what we were made of. And because what ends up happening, you're always changing and you're trying to learn as a coach as well. We all have our blind spots. And if you don't recognize your weaknesses within yourself and within your team and remove the ego, then you can't really find your purpose for the season. And so I just wanted to do that. I wanted to make sure that strategically we can have these tough games to tell us, like, I didn't care about the results. It was more about how are we facing up to those pressures? How are we facing up to that level of play and that speed of play? So that's what we wanted to do. And I think it's paid off so far.
That just made me think everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. You have to get punched in the mouth. Or else, you don't know how you're going to react when you get out there in the season. That just made me think of that.
Yeah, you have to go through the experiences, right? I mean, that's what teaches you more about yourself.
And I have never, to be honest, seen a team go through as many adversities so quickly and so early as we did. I mean, when you're down a man, you've had, to be honest, probably less than people know, you have had injuries left and right. You didn't start this, I don't think you've started the same midfield four yet. And those are some of your key guys. You have Aaron, you have Noah, you have guys like that, Alex, Morel, that have been battling these injuries. And so there have been a lot of adversities already in the first 5 games. And I think, just like you're saying, that preseason was a huge test of how are we going to respond to adversity. Obviously, pretty well. Is that what you've been most impressed with about your team in the first 5?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a good point. The rotation of players and looking at the depth of your team is always important. I mean, I think that goes in any, workplace. What does it look like from my employees here at Bridge City? How does that am I adding to that? Am I bringing in somebody else, a veteran player, to help teach some of the younger players? Or am I giving the younger players an opportunity to play and compete so that they can grow as well? So we have a good balance of that right now. I think the roster's very strong. I think there's a lot of core players. We retained 12 from 2020's championship team, and we added another 9. Wow, 10 almost. So it's been fantastic. The group is good. You have to have that retention to understand the core values and the culture to go forward, and then you need other players to kind of come in and challenge that sometimes, and that's good.
I have a question on that, and it ties into the culture you were talking about earlier. With this business being very unique in that we're an impact for-profit, it took a while for the culture to, like the flywheel to catch, to where the momentum started turning, and it wasn't me just initiating or my managers or leadership initiating every culture piece, and then the culture started to catch, and now it's a thing. And so you kind of alluded to it earlier, even if there is one bad apple, the culture of the team kind of weeds it out. Was there a moment that you can think of where the culture just like caught and stuck for you guys?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was actually last year, and it was probably the game that we went down to Tormenta after losing 2 on the road to Richmond and who else? New England. So we lost our first game to New England 1-0. We had about 70% possession. We couldn't score for whatever reason. Rough, it was just one of those games. And then Richmond was the next game, and we lost 2-1 there. And the game after that was against Tormenta. And we came out and we scored 2 goals in the first half, and we just drove that game. And
perhaps the best performance.
It was a very good performance, and it was combination play through everybody. Really a lot of leadership that stood out there, and Alex Morrell playing against his former team, and Michael McLean combining both for goals, and it was fantastic. So that kind of I looked at that resilience within the group. And I looked at it and I said, that is the culture. That is like, when you get tested, are you going to stand up? Because you're all going to fall at some point. Yeah. You're not going to win every game. And everybody would love to go undefeated. Of course you would, But I try to tell the players and spell it out for them clearly. You start every game with 1 point. Don't lose that point. If you feel you can get the 3, go for it. Let's get it. Play with no fear. And, it's like a few good men, you're in court. If you feel you can get them, if you can get them on the code red, then you get them, If you can't get them, don't go for it. You'll be court-martialed. So it's like, that kind of fine line, or like, are we going to go for it? Yes, we're going to go for it. Let's go.
That's great.
Yeah, so I always try to be positive and think about, let's focus on us and what our strengths are, and let's go and see if the other team can worry about us. We got to be prepared and know what the opposition's like. But I think that culture kind of turned last year.
That's cool.
Which was great.
And speaking of this whole worrying about us, that is something that I feel like I have heard you say time and time again. Because every single week we talk to the broadcasters. Every single week you talk to me. John, what are you going to do about this team? John, what does training look like this week to face so and so? And time again, you give information, but you always end it with, well, at the end of the day, we're going to worry about us. So what would you say, regardless of opponent, regardless of the preparation, 1 or 2 key themes, tactically speaking, for your team that kind of always lead to y'all being dangerous on the field?
I think the number 1 thing is just staying connected on the field no matter what formation we're in. You play 4-4-2, 4-4-3, you can play 3 at the back at times. We've done that in some half times. That we're just all playing as a team, as a unit, and we move together, whether it be with the ball or without. One of the things that I think in the U.S. in general is that a lot of teams in the youth soccer, as well as the senior teams, don't know how to play without the ball. They haven't been trained enough, to play defensively and organizationally to be without the ball. They get anxiety, like, we got to get it back right away. You don't. Sometimes it's okay to not have the ball. Yeah. And so figuring that part out is key, I think, from a tactical standpoint. And then, just in those moments when you recognize like those overloads, numerical advantages, when you can actually exploit the opposition, go for it. Don't hold back. There's no reason in the world that you should be playing with a glass half empty. It should always be half full. Be positive. Encourage each other to do the right things on the field and get after it. And if we continue to do that every day, then the guys have that confidence to go and do it.
I want to say a little something that kind of ties into both the last questions you asked. So there was a group of the guys that came in a couple weeks ago. So I'm fascinated by this question, but I was like, all right, guys, Harkes isn't here, no cameras, it's just you guys.
Yeah.
Like, does a loss really eat at you? Like, how long do you hold on to that loss?
Great question.
When you're moving into the next game?
Great question.
And it was cool to hear them say that. I mean, essentially what they said is like, yeah, it stings for sure, but it sounded like what they were getting at was like, but we get past it, and if anything, use it to fuel us for the next game and then focus on that game. So I want to tell you they passed the test. But I really wasn't.
That's great.
Like,
I love it.
Because you hear people answering the typical response, but I was like, nobody's here. Tell me what you guys think.
I forgot to tell you guys, Craig is on the coaching staff.
Yeah, that's what, so he,
Honorary
assistant.
coach.
Yeah.
The newest assistant coach.
Craig, how are the guys
Yeah.
over there?
Yeah.
Yep, they're good, ready to go.
Yeah.
He should be our mental therapist.
Oh, there we
Yes, he
go.
should be
Yeah.
right there.
That's
But,
it.
I mean, but seriously, like, with anything, I feel like you probably approach business this way, and I know that you approach life this way just based on the conversations we've had. What good does lingering on it do? You know,
Waste energy.
It
Yep.
does.
Yeah, waste energy.
You figure out what you can learn from it. You make sure to do it better next time and you move on. Do you
Yep.
feel that as a small business owner?
Oh yeah, and I think yes, it's just a complicated thing to figure out how to improve on something to not do it again. And what we teach here is failure is okay, as long as it's not lazy failure. So if you're not
Love that.
stretching yourself enough, how do we say it? Let me get it right. If you're stretching yourself enough, you will fail. So if you're not failing, you're not trying to grow and stretch.
Right. You're not seeking growth. You're
Yeah.
not challenging yourself. You're
Yeah.
not trying to take those risks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you are, then you will fail, but then you learn from those and move forward. So it's like failing forward, the strategic failures that are not out of laziness or neglect.
I think this conversation has proved to be enlightening, hopefully for everyone listening, but just to be able to see how truly natural, genuine, authentic this partnership is, this friendship is, the way that you treat our players, the way that you treat their staff, the way that our players treat your staff. It's just a cohesive mesh. It is a unity, and I hope that people take this conversation as a symbol of what can happen when you unite sports and when you unite small businesses. Something really, really cool happens in the community when you put the effort in to cultivate those relationships. So thank you both for taking the time to sit down and chat with everybody, give us a little bit of insight on what training has looked like behind the scenes, and give us a little bit of insight of what it looks like to be a small business owner behind the scenes. So John, Greg, Marion, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll catch you on the flip side.